Hello and welcome to Cape Town, where I have been tasked with comparing two important cars. From Germany, the brand new 3 Series, and from somewhere else in Germany, the Mercedes-Benz C-Class. As with most German cars, there are a myriad of variants to choose from. But today we'll be comparing the 320d M Sport to the C220d AMG Line. Both cars have 2-litre turbocharged diesel engines pushing out virtually the same amount of power and torque. Both cars sell very well in South Africa, and these buyers tend to be very brand loyal. But for this review, let's try ignore the badges on the nose and rather work out which car is the better product. Right, first up, let's get to grips with the Mercedes-Benz. Now, it's important to remember that this chassis is about 6 years old now. And as time goes on, manufacturers work out how to make their cars lighter and, importantly, stiffer. And that has a huge effect on ride quality and handling. But as soon as you start driving this car, you immediately feel it's been set up with a very different intention in mind. It is very comfortable in here. It's the sort of car which I would imagine you'd be happy to drive every single day. Whereas in the BMW, things are very different indeed. First off, you can tell you're in a much more modern chassis. There's very, very little flex in this car at all. It's super stiff. And this car I'm in does have the M Sport package, which means the suspension is tuned to be a lot firmer than in your average 3 Series, and you can really tell. In fact, it's so firm in here that it's actually bordering on sports car-like ride and handling. Fortunately, I've just driven the 3 Series in a more normal spec, and for me that was just about the perfect compromise between ride comfort and handling. And sure, the way this car is set up might be exactly what you're looking for, and that's fine. It's really great to drive this car hard. It's fantastic through the corners. It corners so flat, you'll be forgiven for forgetting that you're in a sedan altogether. But for every other time, for day-to-day driving, this is just a bit too firm. And I'm pretty sure that the 19-inch run flats on this car don't help the situation either. So keep that in mind if you are looking at a new 3 Series. BMW's interiors have come in for a lot of criticism over recent years, mostly because they all look the same and they were pretty bland. And this isn't radically different to what's come before. It's more of a spiffy evolution. It does look expensive, and I think that is probably what you're looking for in a car like this. Most of the materials are high quality, and I really like what they've done with the new digital instrument display. It took them a few years to catch up with manufacturers like Audi, but they have done a good job. It's very comprehensive without being distracting. And the infotainment system in general has been revised, and I do find it a lot easier to use than, say, the one in the Mercedes-Benz. And of course, there's this new BMW assistant. Hey BMW.
Hello, what can I help you with?
What's the range left on my tank?
The remaining range is 437 kilometers.
That's not bad. I mean, I could have just read it. It is over there. But I mean, you know, it's fun to talk to the machine. But for me, there are some very basic things missing in here. For instance, if you would like to adjust your seat electrically, you'll need to spend an extra 13,100 Rand. Kind of feels like that should be included. And if you would like to use BMW's gesture control, you need to upgrade the entire sound system to the tune of 27,650 Rand. The problem for me with gesture control and being Italian is that when I'm having a normal conversation, I'm moving my hands a lot, and I'm sort of very exuberant with my gestures, and basically that means that I'm changing everything in the car all the time. I've changed track, I've gone to a different radio station, I'm navigating to Spain. It's just a disaster. So like a lot of German cars, there are a lot of options to tick, and I think you could easily spend about another 100k on your Beamer, but overall I would say it is a well-spec'd car. The interior of this generation of C-Class has always been quite highly praised for looking particularly classy and elegant. And I must remind myself that when I first saw this interior about 5 or 6 years ago, it really did wow me. I was very impressed. However, what I was not so impressed by was the quality of the materials and the build quality. This has always annoyed me. Look at the way that button moves in its socket and the noise it makes. And this plastic, I mean, it looks good, but it scratches really easily. However, there remain some very nice touches in here. I love the brushed aluminium on the door. That looks particularly good on this AMG line. And for me, this steering wheel is one of the best in the business. It's just beautiful to look at and to hold. So overall, this remains a very satisfying car interior. As in the BMW, this leather is fake, but for some reason in here, it just feels a bit more fake. The leatherette is not as convincing as it is in the BMW. In terms of seat comfort, pretty much call it a draw. I think it's about an even heat. The infotainment systems in Mercedes-Benzes in general, I've never found to be particularly intuitive or user-friendly, but it has improved dramatically for this generation after the facelift, that is. But I do suspect that this is all going to change substantially. We've just experienced the interior in the new Mercedes-Benz CLA sedan, which should be copy-pasted into the new C-Class, and I am looking forward to that. Right, which car has the bigger boot? I brought along a trusty tape measure and I'll be settling this debate scientifically. Start with the Beamer, and we've got a depth of about 950 and we have an opening of about 1100 over to the Merc. And we have oh, this looks a bit shallower. No, also 950, and the opening 1100. Now there must be something. That one does look a bit bigger. Hang on. 51. 53. It's 2 centimeters taller. Now, these cars being diesels, we obviously have to talk about fuel efficiency, and in that aspect the BMW performs particularly well. On a 100-kilometer drive out of Cape Town recently, I averaged 5 liters to the 100, and it dipped into 4.8 when I ran it in Eco Pro mode on the way home. Around town, as a test team, we're averaging 5.5 liters to the 100. And so with its 59-liter tank, that translates into a range of around 1100 kilometers. If you average about 30 to 40 kilometers a day, it means you'll probably fill this car up about once a month. Now that's nice. That's a very nice thing. You'll enjoy that. You'll enjoy only going to a petrol station once a month. But of course, these days it's not good enough for a diesel car just to be efficient. It actually has to be good to drive, especially if you want to call it a sports sedan. And in that aspect, the BMW really delivers. Sure, it's a diesel, it runs out of revs very early in the rev range compared to a petrol. But other than that, there's very few downsides to having a diesel burner under the hood. This is a genuinely good car to drive. The power delivery is pretty linear, 143 kilowatts, 400 newton meters. It's a good amount of torque which you can just ride out of the corner. And of course, with this very direct steering and that super sporty suspension setup that I mentioned earlier, this is a driver's car. Imagine that. Imagine telling someone 20 years ago that a diesel sedan would be a driver's car. Yeah, sure. Over the course of our testing on mixed use roads, we're probably averaging about 1.5 liters to the 100 worse than the BMW. So what's that? About 20% worse. And that's not to say that this is not an efficient engine. It is in the greater scheme of things. But when you're comparing it to the brand new 2 liter in that BMW, it just can't keep up. You've opted for a Mercedes-Benz C-Class that has the word AMG stuck to it in a few places. So you're probably a bit more interested in driving than the average motorist. And I imagine you want to know what this car is like to drive. Well, let's drop 2 gears here. That's good acceleration. On paper, actually, between the Mercedes-Benz C-Class, this one, and the 3 Series, only 0.1 of a second separates them from 0 to 100. The Beamer does it in 6.8, the Merc does it in 6.9, but the engines feel very different, and I think it's down to the transmission. This car feels like it has much longer legs than the BMW. It's the taller gearing, I think. And so it feels like a bit of a lazier engine, doesn't feel as energetic as the BMW 3 Series does, but I don't think it's any slower. And it makes me feel like this is the car that I'd rather cruise long distances in and drive very slowly around town. Whereas the BMW is the car that I'd rather drive hard every opportunity that I got. It almost feels to me, anyway, what I would look for in a car is a sweet spot between these two cars. Could someone just make one of those for me? Maybe it's called an Audi. Look at that, zing.
The biggest issue facing sedans right now is not necessarily competition from other brands, but from different cars in their own brands' lineups. The upcoming CLA sedan will be quite a bit cheaper than the C-Class, and we rate it very highly. Then of course there are the SUVs, which have basically taken over the market here in South Africa, and you could park a Mercedes GLC or BMW X3 on your driveway for around 50 to 60,000 Rand more than one of these, which is pretty hard to resist.
As I've mentioned a few times in this comparison, there is a large age difference between these two cars. But right now, this is what you'll find on showroom floors for the foreseeable future. The Mercedes-Benz is a very likable car, and it's definitely the more comfortable of the two to live with on a day-to-day basis. But this new 3 Series is a really strong offering. It's a very well-rounded package. It offers the ride and handling characteristics of a sports car with the practicality of the sedan and excellent fuel efficiency to boot. It's the winner here for 40,000 less of your hard-earned rands as well. But I don't know if this particular 3 Series is the winner. I think get this engine, but don't get this suspension, and you've got an absolute perler of a car. Am I allowed to say perler? Is it fine?
Cars.co.za has a huge motoring news section full of car reviews. So if you actually are tired of watching me, you can go read those.